Welcome to today's webinar, Understanding Loss and Building a Compassionate Response. We're so glad you could be with us today. My name is Jeanette Tretier, and I work as a Program and Support Services Coordinator with Parkinson Canada. Today we have the honor of hearing from our subject matter expert, Shauna Adeland, as we learn about compassion and the various stages of loss. Then we will be hearing from Carol Henderson, who will share her experiences with loss from her point of view as a care partner to her husband who lived with Parkinson's. We hopefully will have time for a few questions towards the end of the webinar. Thank you to those that submitted questions during registration. You also have the option to ask questions in the chat function during the live webinar. A special thank you to Paladin Labs for sponsoring today's webinar. Now let's get started. Shauna Thaler Adeland is a registered social worker with over 17 years of clinical experience in a wide range of settings. She is also a passionate teacher and has taught at the Algonquin School of Part-Time Studies in the Dementia Studies Certificate Program and at Carleton University in the School of Social Work. Currently, she works part-time as a Psychogeriatric Resource Consultant at Geriatric Psychiatry Community Services of Ottawa and has a part-time private practice. Shauna has a BSW from King's College, where she was first introduced to the concepts of thanatology, which is the study of death and dying. She went on to pursue her master's in social work at McGill with a special focus on grief and loss counseling. Shauna thought her career would focus on children and teenagers until an experience navigating the healthcare system and caring for a grandparent living with dementia changed the course of her career path. Shauna, I know our audience is looking forward to hearing from you, and so the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that kind welcome, and I'm really excited to chat with you guys today. And as you heard from my little bio, speaking in particular to caregivers is just something that I always so cherish, and know you guys don't have a lot of time in the day, so thank you for making the time to be here today. It's a really big topic, loss, grief, anticipatory loss, and how to build that compassionate response. So I just want to kind of acknowledge before we dive in that I know we probably won't be able to touch on everyone's issues in particular, but we're going to do our best to kind of paint a little bit of a picture and just talk about a tool that could be available, and we'll also get a chance to practice the tool, and I'd really encourage you guys to join me today in that. So over the course of the next kind of 40 minutes, we're going to try to normalize the struggle and kind of name what a lot of us are really feeling right now. And I think that's going to be done through the lens of kind of understanding loss and loneliness, and in particular touching on how the pandemic right now is making this especially complicated, and especially for caregivers. We're going to talk about just what is normal anyways when it comes to kind of feelings and grief and loss, and how to respond to ourselves with compassion, how to move forward when it feels like, it's quite hard and overwhelming to think about it. And I'll end with some ideas around resources for anyone who might be piqued by a topic and that we didn't quite get to maybe delve in enough. So I hope you'll kind of, bear with me. I have a little bit of a Beatles masks theme throughout this, just to kind of break up the sections and bring a little lightness to what I know can sometimes be a really heavy topic. And for me, music and humor have been two tools that have really helped me throughout the last 14 months. And so I always try to bring those to my talks as well. And so, just to really start off by kind of saying we're on this COVID road, and, COVID has been a really extra challenging time for individuals, families, communities, and really in particular caregivers of those with chronic health conditions, because it's complicated the role of caregiving for many people, and, losing our communities, losing our support system. So the hope today really is to normalize again, perhaps what you've been facing over the last year, and perhaps even before COVID as well, to hopefully give you a way of naming your experience and maybe the range of emotions that you might be feeling, and again, offer that little small tool on your road forward. So The other thing I also, always like to start off by saying is that this is a scary and anxiety provoking time for all of us, right? So we're going to just name the elephant in the room and say this pandemic has been hard for everyone. And, anxiety really shows up in the face of the unknown or feeling threatened. And I think, a lot of us can, have noticed maybe that we're feeling a little bit of an increase in our anxiety, increase in our feelings. And so, just to kind of also start off by kind of naming that elephant and kind of saying most of us don't like talking about our feelings and most of us don't like talking about our grief. And so, today might feel a bit uncomfortable for some people, might give some other people little aha moments, but we're not going to be afraid to kind of name some of this uncomfortable feelings that we've been having today. And again, to kind of say you are not alone. A lot of people are really struggling with their mental health right now. Anxiety is normal when feeling threatened or faced with something unknown. Grief is a normal reaction in the face of losing someone or something important to you. And, whether you're feeling lonely or uncertain or confused or discomfort or fear, worry, anger, that's really normal. And I think this time in particular has made us, feel feelings that we really don't like to feel, and just know you're not alone. If you do really feel like you're struggling, we'll talk a little bit at the end about some ideas to maybe get you some more formal help. I think one of the really challenging parts of this year has been managing that news cycle, right? I read the news today, oh boy, right? And this kind of battle that we've really faced with wanting to stay up to date with the news out there, but also being inundated with stories of loss, stories of struggle, pain. And really, when we turn on the news, what are we hearing? We're hearing stories of uncertainty, stories of loss, stories of isolation and loneliness. Our favorite businesses and restaurants are struggling or closing. So this can really bring up a wide range of emotions for us around sadness, anger, a sense of hopelessness. And that's just doing something that, we kind of do every day and that we kind of need to do. But it's really kind of, I think, augmented or kind of added an extra layer to for caregivers and people kind of dealing with their own losses right now. Right. And so when we kind of go, well, what else am I feeling? Right. And, the feelings of loss can really show up when we feel uncertain about what our future, holds. Right. And sometimes we call this anticipatory loss. In the newspaper, on the radio, you might have heard it being called ambiguous loss. They're now calling it pandemic grief. Some people call it disenfranchised grief, which is really grief that's not recognized. And, I think caregivers and people diagnosed with chronic conditions often experience this at the time of diagnosis, right? But they're not always given a name for it. A lot of us can kind of relate to it too when our bodies start to change as we age or as we experience mobility changes, and we kind of are sad and we can't quite kind of put our finger on it. It's sort of having the sense that things are going to change for the worse. And that kind of grief is really just so confusing for people because our primitive kind of mind knows that something's happening, but it's really hard to describe because you can't always see it. You can't always put your finger on it, but it really does break your sense of safety. And then you grieve over losing that sense of safety and what you thought your future would look like or your relationship or how your body would operate. And so, I kind of to say, you might hear a lot of different things, but we're really just trying to say it doesn't matter what it's called. It's really kind of recognizing that that's a loss, right? Even if it's not a person or something that you can put your finger on, if you're feeling something that feels like loss, it's loss, right? If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So we're kind of wanting to kind of give permission for us to kind of name that. I think Latin root words are so fascinating, and I'm such a bit of a nerd about it. But really, the origin of grief in Latin is to weigh down, right? or to make heavy. And so if you think about, kind of going, oh, I'm not sure if what I'm feeling is loss, or, anytime you kind of have that heavy or weighed down feeling, oftentimes that is kind of a sense of loss or of grief. Old French kind of says to burden, afflict, or oppress. They kind of also go on to say, injustice or misfortune, which is what loss is for many of us, right? It feels so wrong. It feels so, why me? Why did this happen to me? Why am I so unlucky in this? And then, in English, we really talk about the mental suffering and kind of deep sorrow that kind of comes with loss. So, again, whether you can name it or not, or whether you just have that feeling of going, oh yeah, maybe what I experienced at the time of my, partner's diagnosis with Parkinson's, or maybe with my own changes of mobility as I age, or retirement even can sometimes bring those kind of feelings of loss. It's okay maybe not to name it, but many of us kind of know what it feels like. And I think the other kind of difficult thing for caregivers is that caregivers care, right? So it's kind of this like cruel paradox of life that when you care and you love, it also comes with pain, right? The more you care, the more you kind of hurt when you lose that thing, that person, that aspect of the relationship that you really did love and cherish. So, it could again bring up those feelings, and it's about really kind of, allowing yourself to kind of feel sad and just kind of going, oh, I'm feeling sad because I care and I love. And that's really, part of what makes me human, and part of, the messiness of humanity right now. So I think, when I talk about grief, I think a lot of people are familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's kind of stages of grief. And I think this is kind of what is like synced into, our culture and sunk into like TV and movies, where people kind of talk about, someone I love kind of dies or something happens. And I go through these very kind of distinct kind of stages of grief. And, I think it served a purpose in the 60s when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross kind of described this, to kind of open up the conversation about feelings and emotions. But I want to kind of say that, they've really kind of debunked this over the years to kind of say not everyone goes through those stages, and not everyone goes through them so linearly. And some people feel other things that aren't listed here. And so we have a little bit more of a modern take on kind of the emotions of around experiencing grief and loss. And it's really, it's kind of normal to have this ever-changing flow of emotions. And emotions are like the weather. They continuously change, is kind of what we kind of say now, right? And so, anger might be the thing for you, and you might feel really angry at the loss that you're facing, and other people might feel something else. Doesn't mean that anger is wrong and the other thing is right. It just means that you're feeling what you're feeling. And it's normal to have feelings when faced with losing something that you love and that you care about. So now, a little bit more of like a modern take on grieving is really, taken from Worden and what he described as the tasks of grieving. And, when we think about Kubler-Ross, and that stages kind of imply a little bit of passivity, tasks feel a little bit more empowering for me. And so I hope they do to you as well, right? That there's kind of this idea like, there's something to be done and something I can do, right? Where stages is something that kind of like you pass through, where tasks give you a sense of control and hope that maybe you can impact and move yourself forward. So over the years of working with caregivers, I've kind of taken and kind of tweaked his tasks a little bit, and he kind of talks about task 1, where he calls it accepting the reality of the loss. But for me, that word acceptance is a bit heavy, where really it's that what we've been talking about is kind of noticing, naming, and acknowledging that maybe what I'm experiencing right now is loss. Task 2 for him is really about experiencing the pain that comes with loss. And again, the pain, the emotions, or whatever they are for you, right? And maybe it's sadness, maybe it's, bargaining, maybe it's, anger, maybe it's a combination, maybe it's ever flowing throughout the day. That's how you're processing the pain of the loss that you're living through right now, right? You're a caregiver, you care, right? So whatever that is for you, yearning, sadness, no right or wrong, right? Task 3 on his tasks are really the one about making adjustments. And he talks about the fact that, grieving people or caregivers, dealing with the loss really have to make kind of internal, external, and what he calls spiritual adjustments. And I think, I would imagine when I talk to a group of people, most people are kind of nodding their head at this point in the presentation. And I so miss having people nodding their heads or reading audience kind of cues. But really, when we talk about adjustments, I think caregivers really get that, because being a caregiver is making constant adjustments, right? And kind of going, oh, my loved one needs more help, or they need different kind of help. And so you're constantly kind of adjusting. And so that's really, those kind of external adjustments that we make, right? Oh, we used to share the housekeeping in the house, and now, my husband can't anymore. And so now that's on me. And so I'm making that kind of external adjustment. But I think we don't often talk about with caregivers those kind of internal adjustments that we have to make, as well as for some people, spiritual adjustments are really important. But those internal adjustments now are, if you always felt really, like you had a really good companion in your partner and you're really missing that, and, you're not able to talk about the news or not able to do some of those things that you normally did together, take an evening walk around the neighborhood, you have to start making not only those external adjustments to your routine, but also those internal adjustments of what it means to no longer be maybe in that same kind of couple that you used to be, and what that feels like and looks like for you now, and what that means for you. Task 4 really means, kind of making an investment in this new reality, right? So after you've kind of named and you felt the experiences and you've made all those adjustments, it's really this idea that, if I focus on all the pain, lost, and the fear of the future, I really miss living in the present, right? And so it really talks about, you're changed, right? You're forever changed by the experience of loving and losing something that you love. But how do you now invest in yourself and in this new reality in a way that feels really hopeful and supportive, right? For you to kind of move forward. So I hope that kind of model gives people, again, I know it probably won't, talk to everyone's experience, but really give you a sense of like, oh yeah, like just even naming it, that's something I can do. Feeling my feelings, that's something I can do, right? It's unpleasant. Most of us don't like it, but it is something that I'm doing to work through the tasks of grieving. It's okay to have to make those internal and external adjustments, and it's okay to invest in yourself and this new reality in whatever way is kind of meaningful for you. So I think, no matter what you subscribe to, phases, tasks, anticipatory, ambiguous loss, I think fundamentally most of us can agree that, grief kind of changes you, and having a loved one with Parkinson's changes you, and living through a worldwide pandemic changes you. And there's no right or wrong way to feel about any of it. But we do really know that, naming and acknowledging that loss, making those adjustments in a way that's kind and compassionate can really help us, even though it can't change the situation. So most people then at this point are saying, help, right? What's kind of normal, right? And so, you are normal. Like, welcome to the club. Life can be tough and challenging sometimes. And if you love and care, you're going to feel emotions about losing or that thing kind of changing. And so really acknowledging that helps even when things can't be made right? So now that we're going to, we've spent a little bit time of hopefully kind of normalizing and talking about loss and emotions, we're going to switch now to hopefully focus on some tools that have been shown to kind of help offer comfort when kind of feeling stuck a little bit in your kind of grief process. So I always just like to remind people, right, that there's lots out there. Like if you are feeling like really stuck and not sure where to go, this isn't the focus of my presentation today, but just that kind of reminder that, good routines, staying physically active in whatever way that means for you, just movement of your body has been shown to help you stay healthy and safe and help your mental and your physical health. And also kind of what we've been talking about of kind of being mindful of your stress, worry, and your losses. So kind of noticing it, right? Maybe limiting social media, other things like that. And just kind of having that sense of like, oh, there's something here, and maybe doing that little bit of a check-in to kind of understand what that is. So what now, right? So imagine, right, this kind of tool that really is, meant to be really kind of short and really can over time has been shown to kind of change the neuroplasticity of our brain and bring you comfort in the chaos, right? So hopefully, hopefully I've done an okay job of kind of normalizing whatever you're feeling and kind of maybe giving you words or a name to something that you maybe hadn't recognized before. So, self-compassion, really means being real with yourself, right? Recognizing that you're in pain, you're hurting, and then actively doing something to help ease your pain. So I've kind of been a bit sneaky about this because although I've really been talking about grief all along, I've really been attempting to also introduce the concepts of self-compassion, right? And that kind of mindful awareness that we have feelings and that feelings are kind of a normal part of life, especially right now. That kind of idea as humans to care is to experience pain and loss. And with that kind of COVID road or COVID ends, we're all experiencing distress right now at this current situation, that kind of sense of, common humanity. And each person's losses and pain are really unique, but we all experience, pain and loss. And I think especially again right now, right? And so that last one in the middle there, right? So, is really that aspect of self-compassion. And it's such a great tool. And I'm going to introduce you to one tool in the self-compassion kind of toolkit, and that's going to be affirmations. And, I'm introducing that because there's a lot out there on some of the other aspects of it. And I'll talk a little bit about where you can find more information about that afterwards. But for caregivers, it's really, it's something that doesn't take a long time. It's not too onerous, but it really, the science behind it is really amazing around health and wellness benefits. So, just to kind of clarify before we kind of jump into it of like what self-compassion actually is. So, right, compassion is really this attitude that involves a certain set of feelings, thought, and behavior that can really be directed towards any living thing, right? And I'm sure as caregivers, you have a ton of compassion for, your family and your friends and, your neighbor. And oftentimes, though, we sometimes lack a little bit of self-compassion towards ourselves, right? And self-compassion is really that attitude when it's being directed internally towards ourselves, and that, it has these kind of two key parts, which are really acknowledging your pain and responding to yourself with kindness, right? So acknowledging, oh, I'm feeling loss. I'm feeling sad about this loss. I'm feeling angry about this loss. And then responding to yourself with the same kindness that you'd extend to a friend or family member, right? It's really kind of validating and supporting ourselves through that kind of pain and struggle. And I think, a lot of people sometimes go at this point when I talk about these things, go, well, isn't that just kind of self-pity? Like, are we just feeling sorry for ourselves? And self-pity really is the opposite of self-compassion. It's that kind of excessive absorption in our own troubles without doing anything about that, right? So self-compassion is really acknowledging, validating, giving yourself permission to kind of respond to yourself in a comforting, kind, compassionate way, right? And we know that has the ability to actually release calming and soothing chemicals in our brain. And, does it change the situation? No, but hopefully it allows you to focus on something in your control at this time when so many things sometimes feel out of our control. So there's kind of this idea that, neurons that fire together wire together, right? And that idea of making new neural pathways. So when we kind of acknowledge and notice our pain and we respond in a way that's kind of compassionate, over time, instead of, where most of us right now go, oh, I'm angry, I shouldn't be angry. And then we kind of beat ourselves up. And then you have anxiety about being angry. And then you feel guilty about being angry. Rather than going, oh yeah, I'm human. I'm having feelings around this. My feelings are okay. I can feel my feelings safely. So over time, you're kind of making that kind of link of comfort. When the pain shows up, a more comforting automatic thought comes up. And really, the research is again quite remarkable, and I'll send some kind of follow-up articles for people, that the Parkinson's Society has kindly offered to send. But the research into affirmations really does show that it changes our brains on a cellular level. And, you might have heard people talk about neuroplasticity, and that's really what it is, right? I name the grief, acknowledge there are feelings there, and respond to myself a little bit differently over time, right? So with affirmations, right, that idea is, it's going to feel funny to people because it's not typically how we're used to responding to ourselves, especially when we're feeling loss or when we're feeling pain. It sometimes is how we respond to our friends or family, but it's often not how we respond to ourselves. So I'm hoping again that you guys will play along with me and kind of see what this feels like, right? And we'll probably practice it together so that you have a little bit of a sense of what we're talking about here. So I want you just to, again, be brave and be kind of kind and compassionate to yourself. Kind of go, I need the time to be here. Let's see how this actually kind of feels. So I want to practice, and I want to say this phrase, I'm worthy of self-compassion, a couple of different times. And I hope you'll, if you're in a place where you feel comfortable repeating it out loud, that you do. If you're in a place where you don't feel comfortable repeating it out loud, think it really hardly to yourself, and again, kind of see how that kind of impacts you, right? So I want people just to kind of repeat after me, I'm worthy of self-compassion. And now I want people to lay their hands on their heart. Again, only if you feel comfortable. And I want you to take a deep breath in, a deep breath out, And then we're going to say that sentence again together. And I want you to speak it from where behind your hands are. I know it sounds funny, but bear with me, right? So we're going to take a deep breath in and out. And we're going to repeat, I'm worthy of self-compassion. Now we're going to move our hands to our belly. Again, if you're comfortable, and we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to take a deep breath in, a deep breath out, and then we're going to repeat that sentence, but from behind our hands on our belly, right? Deep breath in and out. I'm worthy of self-compassion. And so, for a lot of people, some don't. Some people notice a little different from speaking it just out loud to what we call speaking it from below the neck. So we know that how we hear things and how we say things matter, and how we speak to ourselves matter as well. So if we are going to do a practice of affirmations, we want to make sure that it's really coming from below the neck, kind of from our heart, right? To ourselves. And a lot of people do find that kind of hand over the heart or the hand over the belly is like a little extra reminder as we're trying something new of where we're speaking from. And it's a great little tip for communication too, when we're talking to anyone and we really want to show our genuine care and concern, to practice kind of speaking from below the neck, right? So I don't know if this will work for you, right? I just know that these are affirmations that have worked for others. They work for myself, right? It's really about finding the words that feel comforting. They may feel uncomfortable because it's a new way of talking to ourselves, right? But we first want to kind of make sure that we're acknowledging that loss, right? Acknowledging the situation, and then adding a little bit of a kind of a neuroplasticity response to our kind of pain or discomfort. So it might sound like this, right? This is so hard, and I can do hard things. I am so angry, and I'm feeling my way through it. It might sound like I'm exhausted and overwhelmed, and I give myself permission to not be 100% of the time. And finally, it might sound like this is so hard, and I am loving and resilient, right? So the combination is going to look very different for people. And so these are, a lot of caregivers like having some ideas of where to start if this is something really foreign to you. But just know it does take a little bit of tweaking to kind of find something that's comforting and that really speaks to you on that kind of deep level. Because this isn't kind of fake positivity, right? This is acknowledging and responding in a compassionate way. Some people like a more formal kind of way of approaching affirmations. Some people really like, a model of I am, I can, and I will, which is another kind of model out there, right? So again, it might sound like I am a caregiver. I can do hard things. I will offer myself compassion today. It may sound like I am resilient. I can feel my feelings safely. I will be loving towards myself, right? So again, a few different ideas for you to kind of, think about, a way to respond to your pain when you can't change the situation. So some final thoughts and affirmations, right? So the literature really shows that when you can use the present tense, when you can state it in the positive, keep it brief, write it down. That's a really big one, right? So even if you can't, say it out loud, which is another big one, right? Just the process of kind of writing it down can really help, again, because we're trying to kind of respond to ourselves in a different, more compassionate way. If you can speak it out loud from below the neck, again, really impactful. If you can speak it out loud in a mirror or on your selfie kind of mode on your phone, really, again, really impactful to really kind of honor your pain and respond in a different kind of new way, right? So this is really about, changing the way often most of us talk to ourselves, acknowledging your pain, comforting yourself. Many people, by the time I get here, are very skeptical of this, totally normal, right? Because this is such a different way than most of us have kind of learned how to respond to ourselves. And it's going to feel uncomfortable at first, right? It takes practice. It does get easier over time. And it's a little bit like learning a new language or learning to drive a stick shift or picking up a new hobby, right? It feels hard and awkward at first and you want to give up. But we do know that it gets easier as those neurons start kind of firing together, right? So, I have this idea of like come together, right? I think a lot of us are really grieving and missing those opportunities to come together. So, even though we're apart in our own homes right now, I wonder if we can come together as caregivers and as people who love and who care about, ourselves to really make a commitment of trying affirmations out loud for the next 5 days and really, seeing if, in this community of support, although we're apart, can we come together and trying something to offer ourselves a little bit of warmth and compassion in these really difficult times, right? And if committing to doing it out loud for the next 5 days seems too big, can you commit to writing down one and posting it somewhere that you see every day? And if that's too big for you, can you start smaller in a way that works for you right now? Because you are worthy of self-compassion today and every day. So I hope some people will take up that challenge. So, just kind of remember, grieving is a normal reaction to losing something of importance to you. Feelings of loss are a normal and natural response to being a caregiver, complicated due to our current worldwide pandemic. It's okay to be having a hard time and really validate and acknowledge your feelings. And, try some affirmations and see what it kind of feels like and see if you can kind of, be a little kinder to yourself. If affirmations aren't your thing, but you're intrigued by self-compassion or I'd like to explore more, there's lots of other aspects to self-compassion, mindful activities, gratitude practice. Selfcompassion.org has a quiz you can take to find out how self-compassionate you actually are. So that's a great place to start. And again, that'll be listed in my resources at the end. So I do really hope, today you made the time to be here. So I know it was kind of intriguing to you. And I really do hope it sets you on a new course to kind of honor yourself in a way that's loving, kind, and supportive. And, this last kind of Beatles mask says, I want to hold your hand. And, I can't wait again till we're kind of together. And, even though I can't kind of reach out and hold the hands to kind of partner along with all of you on this last little phase, I just kind of want to leave you with this last kind of Latin, because I love my Latin, but that really confidence comes from the Latin common fide, meaning with trust or faith, and having that action of trust in yourself. And so I believe in you. I believe in the science of this. You're caregivers and you care. And so really care for yourself too. Consider showing up for yourself with self-kindness, recognition that you're not alone, and maybe trying some mindful affirmations of comfort. It's not easy, I know. It'll take some effort, but it's so powerful, so healing, and so worth it. If you feel like you're really struggling right now, I encourage anyone who feels like, they need more than, a webinar, or they're really struggling with their own mental health, with their own grief and loss issues, to really offer yourself some kindness and self-compassion. Know you're not alone in your struggle right now. Reach out to your family doctor, reach out to a trusted, healthcare provider. I know Parkinson's Canada has a lot of, good kind of resources that they might be able to offer you as well. And just know that, reaching out for help is a real sign of strength and resiliency. And I know I'm looking forward to Carol's little video. And I think hopefully what I've said will kind of be reflected in her own thoughts about being a caregiver and kind of acknowledging the loss. And so I'll end there, and I know I'll come back at the end and do questions, and I'm certainly happy in whatever time we have left to answer those questions.
Thank you. What struck a chord with me was explaining the concept of self-compassion and affirmation. I'm grateful that you were able to share that important message with our audience. On that note, we'll now be hearing from Carol Henderson, a care partner for someone with PD.
My name's Carol Henderson, and my partner's name was Henry. He had Lewy body dementia, and I cared for him for 6 years until he passed in January 2019. The first losses from the disease came before Henry was even diagnosed. One day we planned to go out to our favorite restaurant for breakfast, and Henry just said he couldn't walk that far. I couldn't believe it because it was like 50 meters from our front door. And I stormed off, and I cried for a while. I was angry. But eventually, over time, I realized that he wasn't not trying or lazy. He was ill. And I also realized that the life that we'd planned to have together wasn't going to happen. So the next loss was about 6 months later. I was up getting ready for work, and Henry told me that he could no longer dress himself. I got angry again, but this time I didn't storm off. This time I wrestled him into his clothes, and then I grabbed my stuff and headed off to work where I was going to be late. On the drive to work, I realized that I was going to have to get up earlier every day to get Henry ready and then get myself ready and then go to work. It's not a big hardship, but it was a loss of time. And I was feeling that loss very keenly. I worked full time, and I had a part-time job, and the rest of my time was taking care of Henry. So this left almost no time for myself, and that's what eventually made me burn out. So there were a lot of losses over the next few years as his cognitive and physical abilities diminished. He stopped being able to read. He couldn't understand how to use the TV remote. He couldn't use or keep track of his phone. In fact, it went through the laundry a couple of times. He couldn't use a computer anymore. Now, Henry had been a CPA, and now he couldn't find his way around a keyboard. But the hardest one of those losses was when he couldn't stand anymore, because that meant that I could no longer transfer him by myself. And that's when I lost the time that I would get to hold him. When he was standing, we could hold each other, and that wasn't available to us anymore. And that kind of made me give up fighting all the losses. Finally, Henry went into long-term care, which surprisingly I didn't experience as a loss, because I knew he needed more help than I could give him. In fact, over the next few months, as I started to feel better and was more rested, I had more patience and more love to share with Henry. It was a change, but I didn't experience it as a loss. Over the next few months in long-term care, Henry, his dementia took over. And Henry's dementia involved him believing that he owned a business and that all the staff in the long-term care home were his employees. So he actually spent those next few months very happy and very busy because everybody at the home kind of played along with him, and he felt that he was running a successful business. Then over the next 2 years, Henry's voice got quieter and quieter. And eventually he developed he became aphasic, and he couldn't put words together to make a sentence that was understandable. That was when I felt that I really lost him. He used to be able to make me laugh, and we just didn't have that anymore. Since we couldn't converse, I relied on touch and presence to maintain our connection. I would hold his hand while we watched movies or watched the Jays game. And the thing that I liked the most was when we would be able to nap together on a Sunday afternoon. Parkinson's, to me, was just a relentless series of losses. And as caregivers, we're always just half a step ahead of them. The last loss came inevitably. Henry contracted the flu from his roommate in long-term care, and it quickly turned into pneumonia. We fought it with antibiotics, but Henry was too weak to fight. And I knew that even if we won that battle, that he would be facing that battle again in a few months, and we'd be going through the same terrible experience again. So I stopped fighting the loss, and I let him go. It broke my heart. I have a theory, though, that almost everything is about holding on and letting go. Loss is just the same. You need to know when to hold on and when to hold on and fight, and when to let go and accept. I'm grateful for every painful lesson that I learned about holding on and letting go during my time with Henry.
Thank you, Carol, for sharing your personal story with us. I'm certain that it touched many people here today. So we do have time for a couple of questions. So we'll start with one that was pre-submitted ahead of time. In my case, one of my parents has Parkinson's. In addition to understanding this from my own perspective, how can I support the partner of a person who has Parkinson's? Go ahead, Shauna.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I'm sure probably a lot of you on the call today are in that similar situation. And I think each person's grief is, a really unique journey. But I think, again, that idea of helping us name that, right? So even if you and your parent or whoever it is that you want to kind of help support through their own grief process is feeling different things, just to kind of honor that, like, oh, they're in their, they're working through like the anger and they're doing that. And I may be over here and more in kind of the sadness or kind of overwhelmed feeling, and just kind of to go, both are normal, right? And both need to be kind of acknowledged and honored. And that really kind of validating for your whether it's a friend or a family member to kind of go, hey, like I attended this webinar and, this social worker went on, but this is what she, said is that, you're feeling this and you're feeling it, right? Let's kind of honor it. And I think, when I've certainly talked to caregivers, I think that that kind of idea of those external adjustments is kind of what they sometimes want help with, but they don't know how to kind of maybe word it. And so sometimes if there's anyone out there in the audience kind of going like, I don't know what to help, like just think about all those external adjustments that, your mom or your sister or a loved one might be going through, and seeing if, you can kind of honor them by maybe kind of saying, hey, I see you, or hey, I bet you probably have a lot more on your plate. And if there is something kind of practical you can help with to do, and if not, just kind of, go, that must be really tough, right? And so I think, anytime we can kind of open up that space to kind of sit with them and acknowledge their pain rather than try to fix it, that could be like a really kind of beautiful moment, right? So I don't know if that quite answers the question, but those are my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Shauna. We have another one from the audience. My biggest issue is the extreme loneliness that I feel. Can you address that?
Yeah, loneliness is such a real thing right now. Like all of us are feeling so alone and so isolated. I think, when we talk about isolation versus loneliness, I think we've all kind of been hopefully in an experience, sometimes at a wedding or somewhere where we don't know anyone, where we can be in a room full of people and still feel very much alone. And I think also many people can kind of relate to moments when we are very much alone, like on a car trip or on a nature walk, and we feel so connected. And that sense of connectedness is really, with yourself, right? And so in this time of social isolation and disconnection from routines and things and people, having that kind of self-compassion and having that kind of ability to go, oh, like name it, like I'm lonely, right? And to really kind of see what, meeting your needs in that moment would look like as a way to kind of at least feel connected with yourself and your own needs in that moment. Doesn't change the situation, but hopefully it offers a little bit of comfort in that. And just to kind of, again, echo for like the back row, you're not alone. Everyone's kind of really struggling right now. But when you add kind of caregiving or, other kind of complicating factors, you can really feel alone. So, encouraging, I'm not going to say Zoom and all that kind of stuff. There's lots of other people that have those recommendations. So we've been really trying to talk to the seniors that we work with about kind of really kind of building up that sense of connection with yourself during this time of isolation and loneliness until things do resume a little bit more.
Okay, thank you, Donna. We have another one from the live audience. How does one respond to family and friends who think that Parkinson's person just isn't trying hard enough?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, right? Especially if they're not kind of seeing or don't really know all the changes that they've gone through. And, for them, maybe the last time they saw the person with Parkinson's, they were quite different. And a lot of people do think, just pull up your bootstraps, maybe try a little bit harder, and they don't really necessarily always understand all those kind of brain changes that are going on that can make it hard for them to do more, to be more engaged, or, I'm not sure exactly what the situation is kind of talking to, but I think knowledge is really power, and kind of, helping them maybe understand some of the changes that they've been through, maybe sending them some really nicely, some information from the Parkinson's Society, maybe something along that to maybe help kind of educate them, because people want to fix a problem that they see, right? And that's our brain's kind of way, is we just kind of want to fix, a problem that we see, rather than really kind of going, oh, right, that must be so hard. And it must be so hard for you then to have to feel like you're defending your husband. So, or partner in that case. So really just kind of, honor and kind of know that you don't have to defend, whatever feelings that kind of brings up for you. And maybe, kindly kind of direct them to a little bit of education. And such an exhausting thing, I know, as people living with chronic illnesses and caregivers, to constantly feel like you have to be educating others. And so, again, validate whatever that brings up for yourself, and go, I can do hard things, right? Like, it's annoying to have to keep answering it, and I can do hard things, right? So that real idea of kind of, coming back to, affirmations in any difficult moment.
Okay, thank you again, Shauna. We have another one from the audience. How do you invest in your new reality?
Yeah, such a good question that I can tell you're really thinking about that, right? So that's that task 4, right? And so that kind of idea that oftentimes when we're so focused on the pain from the past and kind of that fear of the future, and we're really caught up in the what ifs, right? Like, what if's going to happen, like what's going to happen next, and how am I going to deal with this? And you've already lived out the next 10 years of your life in your head at kind of exhaustion, rather than focusing on the what is, right? What is happening today? What can I do with kind of kindness and compassion to kind of accept that loss, work through my pain, and find a way to kind of invest in me in that kind of final task, right? And so, I think a lot of the things that we've been talking about, that kind of, building a bit of a self-compassionate response to the pain that might show up for you, kind of honoring that, kind of doing that kind of connection with self, like, what do I need today, and what is within the realm of possibility, considering I'm a caregiver in a pandemic, and there might not be a lot, right? But then choose it with a little bit of like compassion for yourself. And they do really, I know that, times are tough, and if you are really struggling and trying to figure out what that looks like for you, I'd really encourage anyone, again, to really reach out to their family doctor or a counselor to really work through kind of specifics in your own situation.
Okay, thank you. So we have time for one more. At what point should we consider looking for a long-term care place for a partner?
Yeah, that's such a hard question. And I know so many caregivers really struggle, and I don't know if there is a perfect time, and I think it's really different for everybody. But I do think what Carol said in her video, I've heard it from a lot of people over the years, and that kind of idea that when our loved ones finally end up in a care facility, we kind of anticipate it's going to be so hard. And then all of a sudden, it's not as hard as we thought, because we get to be their partner again instead of being their primary caregiver. And so, people experience it in a lot of different ways, but, for a lot of people, they do really say that they kind of feared that and weren't sure they were doing the right thing. And, that kind of experience to kind of acknowledge whatever feelings that brings up for you. And, that's oftentimes about your own physical limitations, resources. And I know we have people here from across the province, and, all the eligibility is quite different across Canada from what I understand. So, I don't know when the right time is for you, but just kind of know that for a lot of people, they're very scared of that moment. And when that moment comes, it's not without its own difficulties often, but there are some kind of opportunities there to sit and hold hands and not have to worry about other things, and kind of, enjoy different moments and socializations in different ways. And I think a lot of homes create lovely community, which a lot of caregivers, when they're a full-time caregiver, kind of miss out on as well. So, not to say there's not, other challenging aspects of that, but I guess that's the best I can do with answering such a big, tough question.
Thank you, Shauna, and thank you, Carol, and thank you to everyone who participated today. What a great session that we had. Our goal for today was to provide you with tools for dealing with loss. I know I took away a lot of helpful perspectives, and I hope you did as well. You'll be receiving an email with the recording to this session within 1 to 2 weeks, along with some valuable resources pertinent to today's topic. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everybody. Be well.